Albert Einstein, Genius Beyond Time. Introduction. Why Einstein Still Matters. Albert Einstein. The very name sparks images of unkempt white hair, a playful smile, and the chalkboard filled with cryptic equations that forever altered humanity's grasp of the cosmos. But beyond the caricature, beyond the cliches of the eccentric professor, lies a story so layered, so deeply human, that it transcends science and spills into philosophy, politics, art, and even morality. Why does Einstein still matter? Why, nearly 70 years after his death, does his shadow linger over classrooms, laboratories, and dinner table conversations alike? The answer is simple yet profound. Einstein's life was never only about physics. It was about curiosity unchained, rebellion against authority, and the courage to trust imagination more than convention. He was a man who dared to ask questions that seemed foolish, and in doing so, rewrote the rules of reality. From a boy who spoke late and was thought slow, to a young man defying rigid schools, to a patent clerk scribbling world-changing theories after office hours, to a global icon navigating fame, politics, and moral dilemmas. Einstein's journey is not just science, it is story. And in our modern world, with information abundant, but wisdom scarce, his lessons grow sharper. He reminds us that the greatest revolutions don't always come from armies or empires, but from a single restless mind that refuses to stop asking why. As we unfold this cinematic journey, you will discover the Einstein you never knew. The child silenced by teachers, the lover torn between equations and romance, the refugee fleeing hatred, the philosopher challenging racism, the man haunted by the shadow of the atomic bomb. This is why Einstein still matters, because his story is our story. The eternal struggle between conformity and curiosity, fear and wonder, despair and hope. Early life, the compass of destiny. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in Ulm, Germany. His arrival was unremarkable, yet from the first days there were whispers of peculiarity. His head, larger than normal, concerned his mother Pauline, but the doctor reassured her. Still, unease lingered. Albert's early years carried another worry: his silence. Unlike other children, words came late. He barely spoke until the age of 3, and even then, repeated sentences softly to himself before daring to share them aloud. Neighbors pitied Pauline. The boy will never be normal. But Albert's world was not built on chatter. It was built on music. Pauline, a pianist, filled the home with Mozart. She gave Albert a violin, and the sound stirred his soul. Long before equations, music became his private language. Then came the compass. Bedridden with illness, little Albert's father handed him a simple gift: a magnetic compass. The needle pointed north, unwavering. The boy's eyes widened. Why? What invisible threads guided this needle? He would later call this moment a wonder that made a deep and lasting impression on me. This was the compass of destiny, the seed of a lifelong obsession with the unseen forces shaping reality. Albert's curiosity grew, but his environment clashed with it. He entered school in Munich under the Prussian system, rigid, militaristic, demanding obedience. Teachers scorned his constant why. One snapped, "Einstein, you will never amount to anything." Another forced him to leave class, claiming his very presence undermined discipline. But Albert's mind wandered beyond the classroom. He devoured books, philosophy, mathematics, and Aaron Bernstein's popular books on natural science, where he first imagined chasing a beam of light. At just 15, Einstein rebelled fully. Expelled from school, humiliated by authority, he left Germany for Italy. He renounced his citizenship, declaring independence from the state that chained thought. The boy once considered slow was now unbound, and the universe awaited. Student years, rebel in the classroom. Einstein enrolled in the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich at 17. He was no model student. Professors found him inattentive, careless with lab work, dismissive of lectures. They called him arrogant, but his mind worked differently. He absorbed theory rapidly, then leaped ahead in imagination. While others memorized, Albert visualized. He invented thought experiments, chasing light beams, imagining clocks moving at different speeds, bending concepts of time and space within his head. His classmates saw eccentricity. In truth, he was rehearsing revolutions. Yet his rebellious streak had consequences. He often skipped lectures, relying on friends' notes. Professors retaliated with poor recommendations, branding him unfit for academic posts. But Zurich also gave Albert something precious: freedom. Unlike Prussia's rigid schools, Switzerland nurtured independence. And in Zurich, he met Mileva Marić. 4. Love and struggles. Einstein and Mileva Marić. Mileva was not like other women of her time. A Serbian mathematician, she was one of the few female students at the Polytechnic. Sharp, ambitious, and strong-willed, she challenged Einstein both intellectually and emotionally. Their bond was instant. Their letters brimmed with passion, equations, and dreams. Einstein addressed her as his partner in science, writing of their shared pursuit. "When I sit beside you, I feel as though I am home." But life was not kind. In 1902, Mileva secretly gave birth to a daughter, Lieserl. History lost her, either to scarlet fever or adoption. The tragedy scarred both parents, though Einstein rarely spoke of it. Despite struggles, Albert and Mileva married, yet their relationship frayed under the weight of poverty, Einstein's rising fame, and his obsessive devotion to science. She felt overshadowed, he felt constrained. Their love, once a fusion of minds, became a battlefield. Still, in those early years, Mileva stood by him, discussing theories, offering critiques, even working through calculations. Some historians suggest her fingerprints linger faintly in the miracle year of 1905. But love and science did not mix well. The rebellion that fueled Einstein's genius also fractured his marriage. The patent clerk, the humble genius. It is hard to imagine Albert Einstein, the world's most famous scientist, as a man who once held one of the most ordinary jobs in Europe. But in 1902, after graduating from the Swiss Federal Polytechnic, he faced rejection after rejection. Why? Professors dismissed him as troublesome. He had quarreled with his instructors, skipped classes, and refused to follow rules. When he applied for academic posts, their recommendations were scathing. Einstein is not suitable for a university position. And so the genius found himself unemployed. At one point, he even considered giving up on science. But luck, in the strangest of disguises, intervened. A friend's father secured him a post at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern as a technical expert, third class. His job? To evaluate designs for electrical devices and machines. From 1902 to 1909, Einstein sat behind a desk, rubber stamping patents. The work was tedious, but it came with unexpected advantages. He later said, "The work at the patent office taught me to view all things with detached objectivity." Reading applications, he was forced to strip away unnecessary details and get to the essence of how things worked. It sharpened his clarity of thought. And there was another gift: time. The office closed at 5 p.m., and in the evenings, Einstein wandered the streets of Bern with his friends Michel Besso and Konrad Habicht, forming what they jokingly called the Olympia Academy. Over cheap meals and tobacco smoke, they discussed philosophy, literature, and science. Spinoza, Hume, Kant. No idea was too lofty, no question too absurd. But Einstein's mind was already dancing with a vision that would change the world. He would later confess, "I was often so absorbed in my work that I forgot to eat." His notebooks filled with strange thought experiments. What if you traveled alongside a beam of light? What if time itself ran differently for different observers? The world saw only a modest clerk, but in those quiet nights of 1905, Einstein was preparing to launch a scientific revolution. 1905, the miracle year. Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, or miracle year, remains one of the most astonishing bursts of creativity in human history. In the span of just 12 months, while still working at the patent office, Einstein published 4 papers that transformed physics forever. Paper 1, Brownian motion, March of 1905. For centuries, skeptics doubted whether atoms truly existed. Einstein's analysis of tiny particles suspended in water, zigzagging randomly, proved once and for all that atoms were real, not abstract. This vindicated centuries of atomic theory. Paper 2, The Photoelectric Effect, June 1905. Light, people believed, behaved only like a wave. Einstein shattered that belief, showing light also acts like packets of energy, quanta. This was the foundation of quantum theory, a field that would later give us computers, lasers, and smartphones. Paper 3, Special Relativity, September 1905. Here was the bombshell. Einstein argued that space and time were not absolute. They shifted depending on your speed. Clocks ticked differently, rulers shrank, and simultaneity was an illusion. Reality was relative. Paper 4, Mass-Energy Equivalence, November 1905. And finally, the most famous equation in history, E equals mc squared. Energy and mass were not separate, but interchangeable. The tiniest amount of matter contained unfathomable energy. All 4 papers were published in Annalen der Physik, a leading German journal. The scientific world at first was puzzled. Who was this obscure patent clerk? How could he, with no laboratory, no university title, dare to redefine reality? But slowly recognition spread. Max Planck in Berlin, the father of quantum theory, saw Einstein's brilliance and became his early champion. Still, Einstein remained humble. He continued clocking in at the patent office, even as his ideas began to ripple across Europe. Looking back, historians compare 1905 to the year Newton wrote the Principia or Darwin published On the Origin of Species. Except Einstein didn't produce one breakthrough. He produced 4 in 1 year, and he was only 26. Relativity and the bending of the universe. Special relativity had shaken physics, but Einstein wasn't done. The young clerk dreamed bigger. He wanted to understand gravity, that invisible force pulling apples to the ground and planets around the sun. Newton had described gravity as a force acting at a distance. Einstein wasn't satisfied. He imagined space itself as something dynamic, something that could bend and curve. What if mass warped space-time the way a heavy ball indents a rubber sheet? And what if planets and stars simply moved along these curves? For a decade, Einstein wrestled with this vision. He scribbled endlessly, discarded false starts, and walked Zurich streets lost in thought. His colleagues thought him mad. But in 1915, after years of obsession, he presented his masterpiece, the general theory of relativity. Gravity, he declared, was not a mysterious force. It was the geometry of space-time itself. The theory was beautiful, but unproven. The world waited. Proof came in 1919. During a solar eclipse, British astronomer Arthur Eddington measured how starlight bent around the sun, exactly as Einstein had predicted. On May 29, 1919, Einstein's genius was confirmed. Newspapers shouted across the globe, "Revolution in science! Newtonian ideas overthrown!" Einstein, once an unknown clerk, was now a prophet of the universe. The rise to fame, celebrity scientist. What followed was unlike anything science had ever seen. Overnight, Einstein became an international celebrity. Crowds gathered outside his lectures. Reporters chased him down streets. His face appeared on magazine covers. Why? Because Einstein wasn't just another scientist. He was a storyteller of the cosmos. He gave people metaphors, rubber sheets, clocks, light beams, that made the incomprehensible graspable. His wild hair, pipe, and rumpled clothes became symbols of authenticity. He toured the world, from America to Japan to Palestine. Thousands filled halls just to glimpse him. Admirers compared him to Galileo and Newton. Women sent love letters. Children adored him. Politicians sought his endorsement. But fame was double-edged. It brought intrusion, gossip, and relentless pressure. His marriage with Mileva collapsed under the weight. Later, he remarried Elsa, his cousin, who became both companion and protector from the chaos. Einstein himself was bemused. He once said, "The crowd applauds me because everyone understands me. They applaud you, Chaplin, because no one understands you." Yet behind the jokes, Einstein was uneasy. He had become a symbol, almost a saint of science. But inside, he was still the boy with the compass, curious, restless, chasing mysteries. And so, while the world celebrated him, he quietly pressed on, deeper into the equations, deeper into the secrets of space and time. Personal side, quirks, music, and humanity. When people think of Einstein, they picture the genius with disheveled hair, scribbling equations that bent the universe. But behind the chalkboards and the theories was a deeply human, often quirky man whose habits, humor, and humanity made him loved far beyond science. Einstein never cared for appearances. He wore the same rumpled suits for years. He rarely combed his hair. He despised socks, declaring once, "When I was young, I found out that the big toe always makes a hole in a sock, so I stopped wearing them." Even at official dinners with dignitaries and royalty, he arrived with bare ankles. He walked to work carrying battered notebooks, sometimes so absorbed in thought that he forgot where he was. There were moments when his neighbors in Princeton would find him lost, unable to recall directions back to his own home. Yet in conversation he was warm, curious, and mischievous. Music was his refuge. From childhood, the violin had been his companion. He adored Mozart and Bach, often saying that their music revealed the harmony of the universe better than any formula. Friends recalled evenings when Einstein would play passionately, eyes closed, bow dancing across strings, lost in melodies. To him, music wasn't just art. It was a philosophy, an order underlying chaos. He loved children and had the ability to connect with them instantly. In Princeton, kids would run to him on the street, and he would stop, ruffle their hair, or show them simple magic tricks. To them, he wasn't the world's greatest physicist. He was the funny old man with twinkling eyes. Einstein's humor was legendary. When asked for his telephone number once, he flipped open a directory. "You don't know your own number?" someone asked. He shrugged. "Why should I memorize something I can so easily get from a book?" To students, he was inspiring yet unpredictable. Sometimes he delivered dazzling lectures that revealed the cosmos. Other times he mumbled, wandered off topic, or even forgot what he meant to say. But they adored him nonetheless because he carried no arrogance. His mind soared in galaxies, but his feet remained on Earth. He loved sailing, though he never learned to swim. On Lake Zurich, or later in Long Island, he would take a small boat and drift for hours. Once, a storm capsized his boat, and he had to be rescued. He laughed about it afterward, unfazed. Even his desk was a symbol of his personality, chaotic, cluttered, piled high with papers. Reporters once photographed it the day after his death. To some it was disorder. To Einstein, it was the fertile soil of imagination. He once quipped, "If a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, then what is an empty desk a sign of?" And above all, Einstein valued kindness. He once wrote, "Only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile." Though he was not religious in the traditional sense, he spoke often of a cosmic religion, the awe of nature, the mystery of existence, the unity of all beings. This was the Einstein that people cherished, not only the genius who unveiled relativity, but the human who laughed, played, and loved. A man who showed that brilliance need not come at the cost of warmth. Exile in America, the shadow of war. By the early 1930s, Einstein was at the height of his fame, but a storm was gathering in his homeland. Germany was collapsing into the grip of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. For them, Einstein was not a hero, but an enemy, a Jew, a pacifist, a symbol of decadent Jewish physics. In 1933, While Einstein was visiting the US, Hitler seized power. Nazi newspapers declared him a traitor. His books were thrown into bonfires. A bounty was placed on his head. One magazine published his photo with the caption, "Not yet hanged." Einstein knew he could never return. He renounced his German citizenship and accepted a permanent position at Princeton's newly founded Institute for Advanced Study. His arrival in America was covered like the landing of royalty. Crowds gathered at the docks. Reporters flashed cameras. But Einstein's heart was heavy. He had loved Germany, its culture, its thinkers, its music. Now it was poisoned. Many of his friends and colleagues remained behind, facing persecution. Einstein dedicated himself to helping refugees, writing letters, raising funds, and using his fame to save countless Jewish scientists and intellectuals from the Holocaust. Life in America was both liberating and alien. In Princeton, he lived modestly in a small house at 112 Mercer Street. He became a familiar figure, the old man with wild hair, walking to work with pipe in hand. Yet he struggled with the American obsession with material wealth and status. He once said, "Possessions, outward success, publicity, luxury, to me these have always been contemptible." Still, Einstein found in America a sanctuary. It was here he would spend the rest of his life. Yet even across the Atlantic, he could not escape the shadow of war. Europe was burning, and soon the world would be drawn into its deadliest conflict. The atomic dilemma, Einstein's burden. In 1939, Einstein received a visit that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Fellow physicists Leo Szilard and Eugene Wigner arrived with alarming news. German scientists were exploring nuclear fission, splitting the atom, which could unleash unimaginable energy. If the Nazis built such a weapon first, the consequences would be catastrophic. Reluctantly, Szilard asked Einstein to co-sign a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt. The Einstein-Szilard letter warned that the U.S. must accelerate its own atomic research. Einstein signed it. His name carried weight. Roosevelt listened. Thus began the Manhattan Project. Einstein himself never worked on the bomb. He was not invited, considered too much of a pacifist and security risk. Yet when Hiroshima and Nagasaki were destroyed in 1945, his equation E equals mc squared was forever tied to the mushroom cloud. Einstein was devastated. He declared, "Had I known they would do this, I would have burned my fingers before writing that letter." For the rest of his life, he became a tireless advocate for peace. He spoke against nuclear weapons, co-founded the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists, and pleaded with world leaders to pursue disarmament. He warned, "The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything save our modes of thinking, and we thus drift toward unparalleled catastrophe." It was his great paradox. The man who revealed the hidden equivalence of mass and energy also felt the crushing burden of what humanity did with that knowledge. His genius had opened doors, but not all doors should be opened. And yet, even in this darkness, Einstein held hope. He believed that reason, compassion, and cooperation could still guide humanity. He refused to give in to despair. In the end, the atomic dilemma became the defining moral wound of his later life, a scar he carried with humility and regret, reminding the world that even the greatest discoveries carry human consequences. Einstein, the philosopher and humanitarian. Einstein's fame could have made him a recluse, but instead he used his voice for causes far beyond physics. He believed science was only one path to truth. Ethics and humanity mattered just as much. He often said, "Concern for man himself and his fate must always form the chief interest of all technical endeavors. Never forget this in the midst of your diagrams and equations." In America, Einstein spoke out against racism. He called it America's worst disease. While Princeton remained segregated, Einstein broke barriers by inviting Black students, artists, and leaders into his home. He befriended opera singer Marian Anderson when hotels refused her lodging. He supported the civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois during McCarthy-era persecutions, even offering to testify in his defense. When Martin Luther King Jr. later rose to prominence, King himself cited Einstein as a moral example of courage. Einstein was also a staunch pacifist, though his pacifism was complicated by the rise of Hitler and the atomic bomb. After the war, he returned fully to his principles. He declared, "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." He believed the survival of humanity required global cooperation, even proposing the idea of a world government to manage nuclear weapons. Philosophically, Einstein was both a scientist and a mystic. He rejected dogmatic religion but spoke of a deep spiritual awe at the universe. He once said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." His religion was not traditional worship, but the sense of wonder, the cosmic religious feeling that unites all seekers of truth. For Einstein, the scientist and the humanitarian were never separate. The same curiosity that drove him to uncover relativity also compelled him to stand against injustice. He believed the laws of humanity were just as important as the laws of physics. The unified field theory, his last obsession. After revolutionizing physics twice, with special and general relativity, Einstein could have rested. He had nothing left to prove. Yet his restless mind refused to stop. For the last 30 years of his life, he pursued one ultimate dream: to unify all the forces of nature under a single theory. This became his obsession, the unified field theory. He sought to merge electromagnetism and gravity into one elegant framework. To him, nature was not a patchwork of laws, but a seamless whole. Somewhere, he believed, there existed a deep harmony, the mind of God, as he poetically called it. But the task proved elusive. Physics itself was changing. In the 1920s and 30s, quantum mechanics rose as the new frontier. Einstein contributed to its foundations, yet he resisted its conclusions. The idea that nature was ruled by probabilities, not certainties, unsettled him. He famously remarked, "God does not play dice with the universe." Younger physicists like Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, and later Richard Feynman embraced quantum uncertainty. But Einstein stood apart, spending countless hours scribbling equations, convinced that hidden laws awaited discovery. His Princeton office became the stage for his lonely quest. Day after day, visitors found him hunched over papers, lost in calculations. Sometimes he'd look up, smile, and say, "I'm close," but he never reached the solution. Many criticized him, saying he was chasing a ghost, detached from the breakthroughs of modern physics. But for Einstein, it was not about fashion or fame. It was about faith in the order of the universe. Even if he could not find the key, he believed it existed. In hindsight, his quest inspired generations. Today, physicists still search for a theory of everything: string theory, loop quantum gravity, and beyond. All are heirs to Einstein's final obsession. Though he never found the answer, he kept alive the greatest scientific dream: unity. Final years, wisdom and farewell. By the 1940s and 50s, Einstein had become something larger than life. Not only a scientist, but a global icon of wisdom. He lived simply in Princeton. His house at 112 Mercer Street was modest, filled with books and music. Visitors expecting a palace of genius were surprised to find a cozy home, where Einstein often greeted them in worn slippers. His health began to decline, yet his spirit never dimmed. He continued teaching, writing, and speaking out. Even in his 70s, he walked to work daily. His letters were filled with reflections on meaning, morality, and the fate of humanity. In 1952, after the death of Israel's first president, Einstein was offered the presidency of the new nation. The world expected him to accept. Instead, he declined. His response was humble: "I lack the natural aptitude and the experience to deal properly with people." He knew his genius belonged to thought, not politics. In April 1955, Einstein collapsed at home. Doctors discovered an abdominal aortic aneurysm. Offered surgery, he refused, saying, "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially." On April 18, 1955, Albert Einstein passed away in Princeton Hospital. He was 76 years old. His last words, while spoken in German, were lost. The nurse attending him did not understand. It was a poetic ending. The universe kept his final thought a secret. In death, as in life, Einstein defied convention. He requested no grand funeral. His body was cremated quietly, and his ashes scattered at an undisclosed location. Only a handful of close friends attended. The world mourned, but Einstein had slipped away gently, leaving behind not monuments, but ideas. Legacy, lessons for humanity. Einstein's legacy cannot be measured in equations alone. Yes, relativity reshaped science. Yes, E equals mc squared altered history. But his true gift was greater. He changed how humanity thinks. He proved that authority can be wrong, that curiosity can topple tradition, that imagination can reach beyond knowledge. His life was a manifesto of independent thought. But Einstein's lessons go beyond intellect. He taught humility and genius, kindness and fame, courage and truth. He showed that one can be brilliant and still human, playful, compassionate, flawed. Today, Einstein's image, the wild hair, the playful grin, the tongue stuck out at photographers, symbolizes not only intelligence but freedom. The freedom to question, to wonder, to laugh at life even while probing its deepest mysteries. His story whispers to each of us. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. Einstein's legacy is not locked in the past. It lives in every child who asks why, in every dreamer who imagines a different world, in every scientist who refuses to accept limits. And perhaps that is the greatest truth he left us, that within each human being is the power to rewrite reality.